Hey everybody, Chris Stayte here. Continuing on with our learning Python video here on YouTube. Today we're going to be learning how to install our Integrated Development Environment, or our IDE. What is an IDE, you ask? It's simply just a piece of software that's going to help us write our code, run our code, and debug our code. It has special features such as IntelliSense, and it can also include things like a compiler or an interpreter, or even both, and dozens and dozens and dozens of other tools. An IDE isn't just simply a small. It can be something from a very small application that can do very basic things to very large applications that can help you prototype your apps or your code and build large-scale applications and do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. For our purposes, we're going to be using Visual Studio Code, and let's go ahead and get into installing that. Open up your browser and go ahead and go to code.visualstudio.com. And this should bring you to the IDE's website. This software was developed by Microsoft, and it's very awesome. It not only supports Python, but dozens and dozens of other languages and developing environments as well. I'm going to be installing this on a Mac, so let's go ahead and download this for Mac. We're going to go ahead and stick with the stable build, which is version 1.17 as of this recording. Once this gets done downloading, we're going to move on to actually installing it. This is a very awesome piece of software. It includes multiple themes that I like, tons and tons of extensions, lots of language support, and I just love the IntelliSense that it does. What is IntelliSense, you ask? IntelliSense will detect the code that you're writing, and it'll detect as you're typing and try to help you move along as far as your pace or making sure things don't get misspelled. If you create a variable at the top of your code file and you want to use it later on, it will detect that and allow you to autocomplete that, so that way you don't misspell it and it's a lot easier to get through. And it personally helps me because I really like to make my variable names very descriptive. That way I know later on when I go to read the code it's very readable. So in order to make those descriptive, they have to sometimes be kind of lengthy, and to retype that a lot you can misspell it or it just kind of gets tiring to do that. So this really helps you. Now that it's done downloading to my computer, I'm going to go ahead and minimize my browser and show you guys how to install this. I'm going to go ahead and open up my downloads folder. You can see here I have Visual Studio Code. I'm simply just going to drag that to my applications folder here on my Mac. For Windows, you should have an executable. Run the executable and it should install it on your Windows machine. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to go to my applications and go down to Visual Studio Code and run it. It should open up a Visual Studio Code window. I'm going to go after it verifies it. Now you'll see here you do get a pop-up on a Macintosh. If you haven't installed applications before that were downloaded from the internet instead of the App Store, you will be getting this message. I'm going to go ahead and click open because I have enabled identified developers on my Mac. If you guys would like to learn that, I'll show you real quick how to do that. We're going to go ahead and go to our system preferences here on our Mac. And I'm going to go to security and privacy, and down here at the bottom you should see an option to where you can allow apps only from the App Store or the App Store and identified developers. You can see it's grayed out because it does require administrative permissions to change this. So if you want to change this, click on the lock icon down at the bottom and type in your password for the actual machine that you're on. You can then enable or disable identified developers by either clicking App Store and identified developers. Now there is a case where you do get applications online that are from not identified developers, and it will not let you install those right off the bat. In order to force that, you will have to come back to this menu, and a pop-up here will show up down here allowing you to force install that. While it's highly not recommended, if you do trust the developer, you can force that so you're not locked out of installing applications on your own personal computer. Now that we've installed it and ran Visual Studio Code, we can go ahead and it should be automatically open up, but if not, go ahead and open it up, and you should be presented with a page that will actually show the like start page where you can customize and you can learn and all that. We're going to go ahead and set up Python now to work with it. Now, to get Python to work with it, you're going to have to install an extension, and the extension store is awesome. And the great thing is they're all free. And so you have other coders and developers out there building tools to help you build your applications a lot faster and a lot more streamlined. We're going to go ahead and go to this left hand ribbon over here. And if you don't have that, you should be able to go to the view and click on extensions here. Once you've gotten here, you should see the recommended extensions here on the left hand side in the taskbar. I have a couple installed already here. And we're going to go ahead and search for the one that we're going to use, which is a Python extension. This first one here, I usually use here. It's a great one. It's by Don Jamain. And we're going to go ahead and click install on that. It might take a second to install, so just be patient. And once it's done, you are going to reload the application. Go ahead and click reload, and it should just take just a second to flash the window and bring back Visual Studio Code. As you can see, everything looks the same, but now you should have Python installed on your machine. I can show you that down here by showing you Python. Now, there's one more step we have to take before Python itself works on Visual Studio Code for what we're using it for. Now, if you installed Visual Studio Code on your Windows machine or your Mac by using default settings, or if you only have just the one version of Python, you might be able to scoot by and get through this course without doing the next step. But I highly recommend that if you do want to follow along and you don't want to end up with any problems, go ahead and follow me and let's get this working. Now, you could have possibly multiple versions of Python on your machine, which Visual Studio Code will not know which one you want to use when you go to actually run the code or debug it. Or you could have custom installed it to a different location and it's still looking for, you know, when you go to run it, it'll be like, I don't know where it's at because it's not in your system's environment variables. So we're going to go ahead and path it manually so that way each time we use Visual Studio Code, it points directly to what we want to use. To do that, we're going to go ahead and get the executable path, or that's the path of Python if you're on Mac, and an executable path if you're on Windows. That process is going to be just about the same. Go ahead, if you're on Windows, open up Command Prompt. If you're on Mac, open up Terminal, and you want to actually run Python. I have multiple versions, so I'm going to specify Python 3, and you're going to want to import a system module. Now, the system module is a built-in module into Python, and we'll get into what modules are later, but for now, just go ahead and import it, and we're going to run a function within there that will give us the path. So we're going to print sys.executable. Once you do that, you should get a path. The path should look something like this. If you're on Windows, it should have an executable extension at the end. Go ahead and copy this, and you're done with Terminal. Go ahead and go back to Visual Studio Code, and once you have, go up to Code, Preferences, and Settings. On Windows, you're going to have to go to File, and then Settings. Now, as you can see here on the left-hand side, we have the default settings. As you can see, it's denoted right here. And on the right-hand side, we have the user settings. I'm going to be editing the user settings, seeing that this is your user account and you could have multiple people on this computer. We just want to mess with our settings. Go ahead and go to the editor over here and type in a comma, and we're going to add a variable here. And you should automatically detect this, but you're going to type in python.python path. And by default, it's going to choose Python, which means whatever default you have on your machine, if you have it. We're going to replace that with the path that we copied from Terminal earlier. Why is it flashing? Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and save this and close out of it. It's weird. Let's go to Code, Preferences, Settings. As you can see here, okay, there we go. So we have Python path, and on the right-hand side, we're pointing exactly to our version, which right here you can see is version 3.6. Once we're done, we can go ahead and close out of the user settings. We can close out of any of these open documents, and we're just going to write a tiny bit of code again, like we did in the last video, to make sure that this is set up and ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and go to File, New File, and I'm going to write print hello world, and we're going to go ahead and end that. And then right below that, we're also going to import the system module again, and then we're going to print sys.executable. Now we're going to go ahead and save our document. I'm going to save it straight to my desktop here. I'm going to call it hello world.py. Python files do have an extension of py. Click save. Now we do, back in Visual Studio Code, we do get the option of a py linter. Now what is a linter? This essentially will go through your code and make sure there's no syntax errors or conventional errors and try to do that. I'm going to go ahead and install pylint. That way in the future it will be able to detect code errors and try to find that. It's a great tool for just making sure that you don't have more errors, which is great because the thing that you don't want is when you click start for your program to crash. Once this is done installing, we're going to go ahead and debug our code. You can do that by clicking the debugger tab over here or just clicking view debug. Once you're done, you want to go ahead and run the code by click start debugging. Make sure that this hello.py is still in the viewable window. If you have a different document open, it's going to be running that. It runs whatever your active window is. Go ahead and click on debug and then click run up here. And as you can see down here at the bottom on the debug console, you can see the first thing we printed out, which is hello world, and the executable path, which should match what you had put in there, which is version 3.6. If you've got this, great. If you don't, throw your problem down in the comments below or do a quick Google search. I'm more than happy to help you out there. And if you've gotten this far, congratulations, because you've installed your first IDE and you've got it synced up with Python and you're ready for the continuation of this course and the next video. Go ahead and throw a thumbs up if you liked it or a thumbs down if you don't. And as always, put your comments in the comment section down below, and thank you for watching.